Hello there folks, back for another video. This one's a little bit different because I guess in this case I'm not necessarily looking at a particular genre or even particular models really. This is actually just me sort of thinking about almost a philosophy within wargaming. So a little while ago on my blog I talked about Stillmania, which is a fascinating way of approaching wargaming from Nigel Stillman from back in the day. Now, I didn't read this initially when obviously Stillman was writing in White Dwarf and all that kind of thing, but I found this not too long ago. Well, obviously when I wrote the article, and basically I was thinking about how you could approach wargaming in the same way as Nigel Stillman did back in the day, and sort of how it kind of takes you away from chasing the meta and all that kind of thing. So I'm just going to go through Stillmania first of all, just of exactly how it works, and then I'll kind of explain what I think about it and sort of how what I like about it. So the whole idea of it is that you are playing in the spirit of the rules and the spirit of the game and the world that you're diving into. In this case, that's the world of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but this could apply to pretty much any game that's out there, right? So within this, you pick an army of a certain points value. Back in those days, it was 2,000 points in order for you to play your games with. A lot of people were playing at 3,000, but he decided to put this at 2. Nowadays, 2k is probably about where you're looking for an army in sort of Warhammer or Age of Sigmar, or 40k or Age of Sigmar, I guess. That seems to be like the sort of agreed points value that everyone seems to go for. From that point on, you write out on your army list and you never amend it. You make sure it fits the background, you collect and paint the army, and this is where he's like, you paint it and then you never touch it again. That is your army, it's how you created it, it is exactly as you imagined it would be. You will name every character, you will give each regiment a name, you will make sure you have the Fighting Cocks, or the Flaming Arrows, or the Silver Steeds or something. You will never then add to this with alternative units or anything like that. You have made your army and you will stick with it to the bitter end. You'll make a carrier case that you can fit your army in exactly. It doesn't need to hold any more or any less. It just fits your army, which I think is really cool. You will always fight your army with it, fight every battle with this army, and it will never change. You will never change anything. You will even take on people who have more points than you with your 2,000 point army, and to hell with the odds. You will never vary or change your army in any way, resist all temptation. You will model every magical item, and this sort of carries on into the next point as well, where it's like you have a WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. If you want to have magic swords and magic staffs and all that kind of thing, then you have to model them onto the models. You will always give your opponent the benefit of the doubt, so you will always be a good sportsman. It doesn't matter that your opponents might know what's in your army, that's all part of the fun. You're just trying to be slightly more tactical with yours, and then you will always shrug off defeat, learn from your lessons, keep practicing and keep playing. And then when you win, the excellence of your generalship will be beyond doubt. Now, the reason that I think this really speaks to me, and you saw it in the articles that he's put together for basically talking about this, is that it gets to the heart of how I've always viewed wargaming. Whenever you see battles in movies or in books or on TV or anything like that between historical armies and even fantasy ones, things are never equal. You're never playing with fair sides. You're never, we make sure we've got to move some of those troops off the field because you've got far too many spearmen. Everything is always stacked against you, or you've chosen the right terrain and that's the thing that wins the battle and that kind of thing. And so embracing Stillmania enables you to look at your collection and be like, right, so I'm going to pick an army that I think works narratively and for my playstyle, and I'm going to use that because that's what you would have if you were diving into a story or a movie or anything like that. And I just think that Stillmania just instills in you a great sense of additional worth within your army. You're not picking up things simply because they fit the meta. You're not picking up things because it's the shiniest new thing. You're picking things up because they worked for the story you wanted to tell. Now, a lot of people already do something similar to this. They collect armies and they will name their characters, and they will always make sure that that character carries a certain magical item and all that kind of thing. They will model wounds and battle damage onto units as they fight and win victoriously or lose in hilarious ways. But I think taking it to that next level could make things really fascinating for the kind of games that you want to play. Now, obviously, this all comes with the cost that you're probably going to lose quite a lot of the games that you play. But in essence, that doesn't necessarily matter. As long as you are fully on board with the idea of Stillmania and what that means, I think it allows you a lot more freedom in the way that you approach your battles on the tabletop. Because not only then from that point are you looking to embrace the amazing moments that happen when something fantastic happens with your army. Your Empire General or your Orc Warlord strides forward and destroys the front rank of infantry, making all of the rest of the enemy flee before them, or all that kind of thing. You're also embracing the heroic Pyrrhic victories and losses that you suffer at the same time, because it's no longer the fact that your Slayer didn't kill everything in the opponent's army. Instead, they managed to whittle down 30-40 of the foes before they finally succumbed to their death, and that just allows you to dive into storytelling and narrative and everything that makes this hobby, in my opinion, so evocative when it comes to putting things together on the tabletop. It's not about the winning, and I know this sounds like a cliche sentiment. It's not about the winning, it's the taking part that counts. Because more than anything with our hobby, we spend so much time sitting, painting our models, building our armies, theory crafting lists, and all this kind of stuff. And very little of our time is spent playing the games, unless you're young and you have the ability to have so much free time of weekends and evenings that you can do whatever you like. Us adults don't necessarily get all that much time. So when it comes to you sitting down to play a game with your friends, I think the most important thing is that you tell a great story, and that comes through victory or defeat. Now, Stillmania is something that I think was really great for sort of back in the day, and it worked really nicely with Warhammer and 40k and all that kind of thing. And it was really fascinating seeing how this army had been built up based on the Bretonnians, you know, using this code of honor and all that kind of stuff as well, doing some converting and all that kind of thing. Some really nice stuff over on Give 'em Lead, actually, which is where I found these particular screenshots from the White Dwarf magazine. So if you want to see more on Stillmania, make sure to go and check out Give 'em Lead. I'll have a link down below. But the other thing I was thinking about is how exactly this works now in the modern day with our current games. And that's where I think power in games like 40k and open gaming work really nicely within sort of Age of Sigmar and that kind of stuff, right? Forget about the minutiae of things. Forget about adding the extra grenade here and there and pointing everything so that everything's, you know, just so and all that kind of thing. And just give in to the power. Because if you give in to the ability to just play power games, you're almost embracing Stillmania without having to go down something as direct as the route that Nigel did in this sort of infographic here. You're building an army based on what you think is awesome and what you think is cool, that is more or less on par with the other army you're going to be facing. But then you get to, when things happen and things are heroic and amazing, that's brilliant, great, fantastic stuff. But even when you lose, you've got this kind of thing to fall back on, where it's like, well, it was a power game, so, you know, there might be some sort of variances here and there. But you're also like, that was fantastic. It was really cool when this unit that I didn't think was going to get much, but I threw them in because they were really low power or something, sort of strides into battle and does some amazing things and all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of still play with that kind of Stillmania feel in general games of Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar at the moment, really, which I think is really nice. This doesn't just apply to Games Workshop and Warhammer, though. I think there is something to be said about embracing Stillmania in pretty much all of the games you play. I think this has come across more within the last little while because we've seen a resurgence of skirmish games, where when you play something like Frostgrave, when you play something like Rangers Shadow Deep, you are building something straight away, and then you have to stick with that throughout the rest of the campaign. You can tweak and change things, but it's all about the narrative and the storytelling that is the main focus of things. But I think this would be perfect for mass battle games, whatever you're playing. If you were diving into Oathmark, for example, I think Stillmania would be a brilliant way to approach things. Because, again, Oathmark by Joseph McCullough is a game which focuses on the idea of narrative and storytelling and fascinating and interesting scenarios and quests within games rather than just being a point matchup where you're smashing things together on the tabletop, right? And so you could still take these rules, these tenets, into what you have with games like Oathmark and, you know, Warpath and Firefight and even Infinity and all these kind of games. I think you could embrace this idea of playing within the spirit of the game and embracing the narrative and the storytelling, be that through winning or through losing. And there's nothing that stops you apart from people who say you need to chase the meta and you need to have the best things and you need to always play with this in your army and all that kind of thing. Screw that. If you want to make an army of entirely Noblars for a Ogre Kingdoms army in Warhammer Fantasy Battle or Age of Sigmar, do it. If you want to play an army of entirely Wraiths in an Eldar army for Warhammer 4000, do it. If you want to play with a really awesome, amazing elite army where your numbers are so low but all of your warriors are amazingly kitted out and they all have their own little personality and that kind of thing, and you're going against armies that are maybe 2 or 3 times as big as yours, embrace it and go for it and have fun with the idea of telling stories with your wargaming miniatures rather than them simply being chess pieces that you're pushing around the table in order to beat your opponent. Our hobby is so full of creativeness and a depth of skill and talent when it comes to painting things and bringing models to life. And you tell stories even if you don't know it when you're building your miniatures and posing them in certain ways. That it would be a shame for all of that to be lost in the pursuit of it simply just being a dice chucking exercise where you throw dice and that's it. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't go as far as what Nigel Stillman did with his rules, as you see here, but I think it's well worth embracing something of that in the kind of games that you play in the future, and maybe having another think about the way you play games and the reason why you play games. As I said earlier, our time is very precious when it comes to what we can give to the hobby and the time that we can spend playing, playing for 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours in a game that we get once every 3 months or something. So think about what you're putting into it, why you're picking the models that you are picking, and then when it comes to those games as well, if you're playing it simply because you want to win or because you want to have fun with the idea of wargaming and what it represents. Historical wargamers have been doing this already for years. Historical wargames often are played with points values, but for the most part they're done to represent or recreate an existing historical conflict. And in most cases in history, as I said at the beginning, those battles were never fair. The Romans almost always outskilled their opponents. And so it was a fascinating thing seeing how barbarian hordes from, Gaul and Celtish warriors on their chariots would deal with something that was effectively a military machine on the battlefield. Vikings fought very different from Saxons, who fought very different from Franks, who fought very differently from the Arab forces of the Crusades and all this kind of thing. And things were never on an even keel. And so embracing something of that and carrying it over, as Nigel Stillman did, into your games, I think was a really fascinating way to approach things. Maybe next time you sit down to play a game, you don't make it equal. You give someone 1,500 points, for example, and the other person takes 2,000. Or maybe you go even further and have 1,000 versus 2,000. But you make the games that you play interesting and full of quirky scenario rules and all that kind of thing. Maybe that 1,000 point army that your friend is playing with isn't just trying to fight the opponent over 5 turns and wipe out units. Maybe they're trying to secure an objective, and if they can hold it for 3 turns, they win. Suddenly that becomes a really different way of approaching and playing games, and I think it's something that gets lost in this idea of Warhammer and Age of Sigmar and lots of other games being focused around the idea of it having to be tournaments and all that kind of stuff. We see this in the way that Games Workshop is almost video gamed the way that we approach things, with updates to rules every quarter and all that kind of stuff. Maybe don't fall into that grind. Maybe approach things in a different way and have a look at what Nigel Stillman did back in the day, and maybe use that when it comes to setting up your armies on the tabletop and having fun with your friends. It'll be really interesting to hear if anyone's ever done anything like this. Have you ever just made an army, left it as is, and always played with that army and always played it the way you've always done? Is that something that you find fun? Do you feel like you have to chase the meta? Is Stillmania and this way of playing games something that you think you're going to dive into in the future? I would love to know in the comments down below. If you want to, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, give it a share somewhere on social media if you wanted to, on Twitter or on Facebook. Just give me a tag. You'll be able to find me because of dragons on all sorts of different things. Check out my blog as well if you want to go and have a look at an article where I talked a little bit more about Stillmania and how that approach can be an interesting one. And don't forget to check out Givenled as well, where I managed to source these fantastic images from Old White Dwarfs, which talked about things as well. And you'll be able to follow along and find all these pieces for yourself. But yeah, Stillmania, what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll be back to do another video very, very soon. Bye for now.